Costa's audiobook presents The Last Unicorn, written by Peter S. Beagle. Chapter 6. Captain Cully fell asleep 13 stanzas into the 19th song, and Schmendrick, who had stopped laughing somewhat sooner, promptly set about trying to free himself. He strained against his bonds with all his strength, but they held fast. Jack Jingley had wrapped him in enough rope to rig a small schooner and tied knots the size of skulls. Gently, gently, he counseled himself. No man with the power to summon Robin Hood, indeed to create him, can be bound for long. A word, a wish, and this tree must be an acorn on the branch again, this rope be green in the marsh. But he knew before he called on it that whatever had visited him for a moment was gone again, leaving only an ache where it had been. He felt like an abandoned chrysalis. "Do as you will," he said softly. Captain Cully roused at his voice and sang the 14th stanza. "There are 50 swords without the house, and 50 more within, and I do fear me, Captain, they are like to do us in." "Ha done, says Captain Cully, "and never fear again, for they may be 100 swords, but we are 7 men." "I hope you get slaughtered," the magician told him, but Cully was asleep again. Schmendrick attempted a few simple spells for escaping, but he could not use his hands, and he had no more heart for tricks. What happened instead was that the tree fell in love with him and began to murmur fondly of the joy to be found in the eternal embrace of a red oak. "Always, always," it sighed, "faithfulness beyond any man's deserving. I will keep the color of your eyes when no other in the world remembers your name. There is no immortality but a tree's love." "I'm engaged," Schmendrick excused himself, "to a Western lodge, since childhood. Marriage by contract, no choice in the matter. Hopeless. Our story is never to be." A gust of fury shook the oak, as though a storm were coming to it alone. "Gulls and fire-blight on her," it whispered savagely. "Damned softwood, cursed conifer, deceitful evergreen. She'll never have you. We will perish together, and all trees shall treasure our tragedy." Along his length Schmendrick could feel the tree heaving like a heart, and he feared that it might actually split in two with rage. The ropes were growing steadily tighter around him, and the night was beginning to turn red and yellow. He tried to explain to the oak that love was generous precisely because it could never be immortal, and then he tried to yell for Captain Cully, but he could only make a small creaking sound, like a tree. "She means well," he thought, and gave himself up for loved. Then the ropes went slack as he lunged against them, and he fell to the ground on his back, wriggling for air. The unicorn stood over him, dark as blood in his darkened vision. She touched him with her horn. When he could rise she turned away, and the magician followed her, wary of the oak, though it was once again as still as any tree that had never loved. The sky was still black, but it was a watery darkness through which Schmendrick could see the violet dawn swimming. Hard silver clouds were melting as the sky grew warm. Shadows dulled. Sounds lost their shape, and shapes had not yet decided what they were going to be that day. Even the wind wondered about itself. "Did you see me?" he asked the unicorn. "Were you watching? Did you see what I made?" "Yes," she answered. "It was true magic." The loss came back, cold and bitter as a sword. "It's gone now," he said. "I had it. It had me, but it's gone now. I couldn't hold it." The unicorn floated on before him, silent as a feather. Close by, a familiar voice said, "Leaving us so early, magician? The men will be sorry they missed you." He turned and saw Molly Grue leaning against a tree. Dress and ditty hair tattered alike, bare feet bleeding and beslimed, she gave him a bat's grin. "Surprise," she said. "It's Maid Marianne." Then she saw the unicorn. She neither moved nor spoke, but her tawny eyes were suddenly big with tears. For a long moment she did not move. Then each fist seized a handful of her hem, and she warped her knees into a kind of trembling crouch. Her ankles were crossed and her eyes were lowered, but for all that it took Schmendrick another moment to realize that Molly Grue was curtsying. He burst out laughing, and Molly sprang up, red from hairline to throat hollow. "Where have you been?" she cried. "Damn you, where have you been?" She took a few steps toward Schmendrick, but she was looking beyond him, at a unicorn. When she tried to get by, the magician stood in her way. "You don't talk like that," he told her, still uncertain that Molly had recognized the unicorn. "Don't you know how to behave, woman? You don't curtsy either." But Molly pushed him aside and went up to the unicorn, scolding her as though she were a strayed milk cow. "Where have you been?" Before the whiteness and the shining horn, Molly shrank to a shrilling beetle. But this time it was the unicorn's old dark eyes that looked down. "I'm here now," she said at last. Molly laughed with her lips flat. "And what good is it to me that you're here now? Where were you 20 years ago, 10 years ago? How dare you? How dare you come to me now, when I am this?" With a flap of her hand she summed herself up, barren face, desert eyes, and yellowing heart. "I wish you had never come. Why do you come now?" The tears began to slide down the sides of her nose. The unicorn made no reply, and Schmendrick said, "She is the last. She is the last unicorn in the world." "She would be," Molly sniffed. "It would be the last unicorn in the world that came to Molly Grue." She reached up then to lay her hand on the unicorn's cheek, but both of them flinched a little, and the touch came to rest on the swift, shivering place under the jaw. Molly said, "It's all right. I forgive you." Unicorns are not to be forgiven. The magician felt himself growing giddy with jealousy, not only of the touch, but of something like a secret that was moving between Molly and the unicorn. "Unicorns are for beginnings," he said, "for innocence and purity, for newness. Unicorns are for young girls." Molly was stroking the unicorn's throat as timidly as though she were blind. She dried her grimy tears on the white mane. "You don't know much about unicorns," she said. The sky was jade grey now, and the trees that had been drawn on the dark a moment ago were real trees again, hissing in the dawn wind. Schmendrick said coldly, looking at the unicorn, "We must go." Molly agreed promptly. "Aye, before the men stumble on us and slit your throat for cheating them, the poor lads." She looked over her shoulder. "I had some things I wanted to take, but they don't matter now. I'm ready." Schmendrick barred her way again as he stepped forward. "You can't come with us. We are on a quest." His voice and eyes were as stern as he could make them, but he could feel his nose being bewildered. He had never been able to discipline his nose. Molly's own face closed like a castle against him, trundling out the guns and slings and cauldrons of boiling lead. "And who are you to say we?" "I'm her guide," the magician said importantly. The unicorn made a soft wondering sound, like a cat calling her kittens. Molly laughed loud and made it back. "You don't know much about unicorns," she repeated. "She's letting you travel with her, though I can't think why, but she has no need of you. She doesn't need me either. Heaven knows, but she'll take me too. Ask her." The unicorn made the soft sound again, and the castle of Molly's face lowered the drawbridge and threw wide even its deepest keep. "Ask her," she said. Schmendrick knew the unicorn's answer by the sinking in his heart. He meant to be wise, but then his envy and emptiness hurt him, and he heard himself cry out sadly, "Never! I forbid it. I, Schmendrick the magician." His voice darkened, and even his nose grew menacing. "Be wary of rousing a wizard's wrath." "Rousing? If I chose to turn you into a frog." "I should laugh myself sick," said Molly Grue pleasantly. "You're handy with fairy tales, but you can't turn cream into butter." Her eyes gleamed with a sudden mean understanding. "Have sense, man," she said. "What were you going to do with the last unicorn in the world? Keep her in a cage?" The magician turned away to keep Molly from seeing his face. He did not look directly at the unicorn, but stole small sights of her as stealthily as though he could be made to put them back. White and secret, morning-horned, she regarded him with piercing gentleness, but he could not touch her. He said to the thin woman, "You don't even know where we are bound." "Do you think it matters to me?" Molly asked. She made the cat sound once more. Schmendrick said, "We are journeying to King Haggard's country to find a red bull." Molly's skin was frightened for a moment, whatever her bones believed or her heart knew. But then the unicorn breathed softly into her cupped hand, and Molly smiled as she closed her fingers on the warmth. "Well, you are going the wrong way," she said. The sun was rising as she led them back the way they had come, past Cully, still slumped asleep on his stump, across the clearing and away. The men were returning. Dead branches cracked close at hand, and brush broke with a splashing sound. Once they had to crouch among the thorns while two of Cully's weary rogues limped by, wondering bitterly whether the vision of Robin Hood had been real or not. "I smelt them," the first man was saying. "Eyes are easy to deceive, and cheats by nature, but surely no shadow has a smell." "The eyes are perjurers, right enough," grunted the second man, who seemed to be wearing a swamp. "But do you truly trust the testimony of your ears, of your nose, of the root of your tongue? Not I, my friend. The universe lies to our senses, and they lie to us. And how can we ourselves be anything but liars? For myself, I trust neither message nor messenger, neither what I am told nor what I see. There may be truth somewhere, but it never gets down to me." "Ah," said the first man with a black grin, "but you came running with the rest of us to go with Robin Hood, and you hunted for him all night, crying and calling like the rest of us. Why not save yourself the trouble, if you know better?" "Well, you never know," the other answered thickly, spitting mud. "I could be wrong." There were a prince and a princess sitting by a stream in a wooded valley. Their 7 servants had set up a scarlet canopy beneath a tree, and the royal young couple ate a boxed lunch to the accompaniment of lutes and theorbos. They hardly spoke a word to one another until they had finished the meal, and then the princess sighed and said, "Well, I suppose I'd best get this silly business over with." The prince began to read a magazine. "You might at least," said the princess, but the prince kept on reading. The princess made a sign to 2 of the servants, who began to play an older music on their lutes. Then she took a few steps on the grass, held up a bridle bright as butter, and called, "Here, unicorn, here, here, my pretty, here to me. Come, 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 come." The prince snickered. "It's not chickens you're calling, you know," he remarked without looking up. "Why don't you sing something, instead of clucking like that?" "Well, I'm doing the best I can," the princess cried. "I've never called one of these things before." But after a little silence, she began to sing. "I am a king's daughter, and if I cared to care, the moon that has no mistress would flutter in my hair. No one dares to cherish what I choose to crave. Never have I hungered that I did not have. I am a king's daughter, and I grow old within the prison of my person, the shackles of my skin, and I would run away and beg from door to door, just to see your shadow once and never more." So she sang and sang again, and then she called, "Nice unicorn, pretty, pretty, pretty," for a little longer, and then she said angrily, "Well, I've done as much as I'll do. I'm going home." The prince yawned and folded his magazine. "You satisfied custom well enough," he told her, "and no one expected more than that. It was just a formality. Now we can be married." "Yes," the princess said, "now we can be married." The servants began to pack everything away again, while the 2 with the lutes played joyous wedding music. The princess's voice was a little sad and defiant as she said, "If there really were such things as unicorns, one would have come to me. I called as sweetly as anyone could, and I had the golden bridle. And of course I'm pure and untouched." "For all of me, you are," the prince answered indifferently. "As I say, you satisfy custom. You don't satisfy my father, but then neither do I. That would take a unicorn." He was tall, and his face was as soft and pleasant as a marshmallow. When they and their retinue were gone, the unicorn came out of the wood, followed by Molly and the magician, and took up her journey again. A long time later, wandering in another country where there were no streams and nothing green, Molly asked her why she had not gone to the princess's song. Schmendrick drew near to listen to the answer, though he stayed on his side of the unicorn. He never walked on Molly's side. The unicorn said, "That king's daughter would never have run away to see my shadow. If I had shown myself, and she had known me, she would have been more frightened than if she had seen a dragon, for no one makes promises to a dragon. I remember that once it never mattered to me whether or not princesses meant what they sang. I went to them all and laid my head in their laps, and a few of them rode on my back, though most were afraid. But I have no time for them now, princesses or kitchen maids. I have no time." Molly said something strange then, for a woman who never slept a night through without walking many times to see if the unicorn was still there, and whose dreams were all of golden bridals and gentle young thieves. It's the princesses who have no time, she said. The sky spins and drags everything along with it. Princesses and magicians and poor Cully and all, but you stand still. You never see anything just once. I wish you could be a princess for a little while, or a flower, or a duck, something that can't wait. She sang a verse of a doleful, limping song, halting after each line as she tried to recall the next. Who has choices need not choose. We must who have none. We can love but what we lose. What is gone is gone. Schmendrick peered over the unicorn's back into Molly's territory. Where did you hear that song? He demanded. It was the first he had spoken to her since the dawn when she joined the journey. Molly shook her head. I don't remember. I've known it a long time. The land had grown leaner day by day as they travelled on, and the faces of the folk they met had grown bitter with the brown grass. But to the unicorn's eyes, Molly was becoming a softer country, full of pools and caves, where old flowers came burning out of the ground. Under the dirt and indifference, she appeared only 37 or 38 years old, no older than Schmendrick, surely, despite the magician's birthday-list face. Her rough hair bloomed, her skin quickened, and her voice was nearly as gentle to all things as it was when she spoke to the unicorn. The eyes would never be joyous, any more than they could ever turn green or blue, but they too had wakened in the earth. She walked eagerly into King Haggard's realm on bare, blistered feet, and she sang often. And far away on the other side of the unicorn, Schmendrick the magician stalked in silence. His black cloak was sprouting holes, coming undone, and so was he. The rain that renewed Molly did not fall on him, and he seemed ever more parched and deserted, like the land itself. The unicorn could not heal him. A touch of her horn could have brought him back from death, but over despair she had no power, nor over magic that had come and gone. So they journeyed together, following the fleeing darkness into a wind that tasted like nails. The rind of the country cracked, and the flesh of it peeled back into gullies and ravines or shriveled into scabby hills. The sky was so high and pale that it disappeared during the day, and the unicorn sometimes thought that the three of them must look as blind and helpless as slugs in the sunlight, with their log or their dank rock tumbled away. But she was a unicorn still, with a unicorn's way of growing more beautiful in evil times and places. Even the breath of the toads that grumbled in the ditches and dead trees stopped when they saw her. Toads would have been more hospitable than the sullen folk of Haggard's country. Their villages lay bald as bones between knife-like hills where nothing grew, and they themselves had hearts unmistakably as sour as boiled beer. Their children stoned strangers into town, and their dogs chased them out again. Several of the dogs never returned, for Schmendrick had developed a quick hand and a taste for mongrel. This infuriated the townsmen as no mere theft would have done. They gave nothing away, and they knew that their enemies were those who did. The unicorn was weary of human beings, watching her companions as they slept, seeing the shadows of their dreams scurry over their faces. She would feel herself bending under the heaviness of knowing their names. Then she would run until morning to ease the ache. Swifter than rain, swift as loss, racing to catch up with the time when she had known nothing at all but the sweetness of being herself. Often then, between the rush of one breath and the reach of another, it came to her that Schmendrick and Molly were long dead, and King Haggard as well, and the Red Bull met and mastered, so long ago that the grandchildren of the stars that had seen it all happen were withering now, turning to coal, and that she was still the only unicorn left in the world. Then, one hourless autumn evening, they rounded a ridge and saw the castle. It crept into the sky from the far side of a long, deep valley, thin and twisted, bristling with thorny turrets, dark and jagged as a giant's grin. Molly laughed outright, but the unicorn shivered, for to her the crooked towers seemed to be groping toward her through the dusk. Beyond the castle, the sea glimmered like iron. Haggard's fortress, Schmendrick murmured, shaking his head in wonderment. Haggard's dire keep. A witch built it for him, they say, but he wouldn't pay her for her work, so she put a curse on the castle. She swore that one day it would sink into the sea with Haggard when his greed caused the sea to overflow. Then she gave a fearful shriek, the way they do, and vanished in a sulphurous puff. Haggard moved in right away. He said no tyrant's castle was complete without a curse. "I don't blame him for not paying her," Molly Grimes said scornfully. "I could jump on that place myself and scatter it like a pile of leaves. Anyway, I hope the witch has something interesting to do while she waits for that curse to come home. The sea is greater than anyone's greed." Bony Bird struggled across the sky, squealing, "Help me, help me, help me!" And small black shapes bobbled at the lightless windows of King Haggard's castle. A wet, slow smell found the unicorn. "Where is the bull?" she asked. "Where does Haggard keep the bull?" "No one keeps the red bull," the magician replied quietly. "I've heard that he roams at night and lies up by day in a great cavern beneath the castle. We'll know soon enough, but that's not our problem now. The nearer danger lies there." He pointed down into the valley, where a few lights had begun to shiver. "That is Hagsgate," he said. Molly made no answer, but she touched the unicorn with a hand as cold as a cloud. She often put her hands on the unicorn when she was sad, or tired, or afraid. "This is King Haggard's town," Schmendrick said. "The first one he took when he came over the sea. The one that has lain longest under his hand. It has a wicked name, though none I ever met could say exactly why. No one goes into Hagsgate, and nothing comes out of it but tales to make children behave. Monsters, werebeasts, witch covens, demons in broad daylight, and the like. But there is something evil in Hagsgate, I think. Mummy Fortuna would never go there, and once she said that even Haggard was not saved while Hagsgate stood. There is something there." He peered closely at Molly as he spoke, for it was his one bitter pleasure these days to see her frightened in spite of the white presence of the unicorn. But she answered him quite calmly, with her hands at her sides. "I've heard Hagsgate called the town that no man knows. Maybe its secret was waiting for a woman to find it out, a woman and a unicorn. But what's to be done with you?" Schmendrick smiled again. "I'm no man," he said. "I'm a magician with no magic, and that's no one at all." The foxfire lights of Hagsgate grew brighter as the unicorn watched them, but not even a flint flared in King Haggard's castle. It was too dark to see men moving on the walls, but across the valley she could hear the soft boom of armor and the clatter of pikes on stone. Sentinels had met and marched away again. The smell of the Red Bull sported all round the unicorn as she started down the thin, brambly path that led to Hagsgate. Chapter 7. The town of Hagsgate was shaped like a footprint. Long toes splay from a broad paw and ending in the dark claws of a dagger. And indeed, where the other towns of King Haggard's realm seemed to scratch like sparrows at the mean land, Hagsgate was well and deeply dug in. Its streets were smoothly paved, its gardens glowed, and its proud houses might have grown up out of the earth like trees. Lights shone in every window, and the three travelers could hear voices, and dogs barking, and dishes being scrubbed until they squeaked. They halted by a high hedge, wondering. "Do you suppose we took a wrong turn somewhere, and this isn't Hagsgate at all?" Molly whispered. She brushed foolishly at her hopeless rags and tatters. "I knew I should have brought my good dress," she sighed. Schmendrick rubbed the back of his neck wearily. "It's Hagsgate," he answered her. "It must be Hagsgate, and yet there's no smell of sorcery, no air of black magic. But why the legends, then? Why the fables and fairy tales? Very confusing, especially when you've had half a turnip for dinner." The unicorn said nothing. Beyond the town, darker than the dark, King Haggard's castle teetered like a lunatic on stilts, and beyond the castle the sea slid. The scent of the Red Bull moved in the night, cold among the town's smells of cooking and living. Schmendrick said, "The good people must all be indoors, counting their blessings. I'll help them." He stepped forward and drew back his cloak, but he had not yet opened his mouth when a hard voice said out of the air, "Save your breath, stranger, while you have it." 4 men sprang from behind the hedge. 2 of them set their swords at Schmendrick's throat, while another guarded Molly with a pair of pistols. The 4th approached the unicorn and seized her mane, but she reared up, shining fiercely, and he jumped away. "Your name?" the man who had first spoken demanded of Schmendrick. He was middle-aged or more, as were they all, dressed in fine, dull clothing. "Gig," said the magician, because of the swords. "Gig," mused the man with the pistols. "An alien name." "Naturally," the first man said. "All names are alien in Hagsgate. Well, Mr. Gig," he went on, lowering his sword slightly to the point where Schmendrick's collarbones converged, "if you and Mrs. Gig would kindly tell us what brings you skulking here." Schmendrick found his voice at that. "I hardly know the woman," he roared. "My name is Schmendrick, Schmendrick the magician, and I am hungry and tired and unpleasant. Put those things away, or you each have a scorpion by the wrong end." The four men looked at one another. "A magician," said the first man. "The very thing." Two of the others nodded, but the man who had tried to capture the unicorn grumbled. "Anyone can say he's a magician these days. The old standards are gone. The old values have been abandoned. Besides, a real magician has a beard." "Well, if he isn't a magician," the first man said lightly, "he'll wish he were, soon enough." He sheathed his sword and bowed to Schmendrick and Molly. "I am Drinn," he said, "and it is possibly a pleasure to welcome you to Hagsgate. You spoke of being hungry, I believe. That's easily remedied. And then perhaps you will do us a good turn in your professional capacity. Come with me." Grown suddenly gracious and apologetic, he led them toward a lighted inn, while the three other men followed close behind. More townsfolk came running up now, streaming eagerly from their houses with their own dinners half eaten and their tea left steaming, so that by the time Schmendrick and Molly were seated, there were nearly 100 people wedged together on the inn's long benches, jamming into the doorway and falling through the windows. The unicorn, unnoticed, paced slowly after, a white mare with strange eyes. The man named Drinn sat at the same table with Schmendrick and Molly, chattering as they ate, and filling their glasses with a very black wine. Molly Grue drank very little. She sat quietly looking at the faces around her and noting that none seemed any younger than Drinn's face, though a few were much older. There was a way in which all the Hagsgate faces were very much alike, but she could not find it. "And now," Drinn said when the meal was over, "now you must permit me to explain why we greeted you so uncivilly." "Pish, no need," Schmendrick chuckled. The wine had made him chuckly and easy, and had brightened his green eyes to gold. "What I want to know is the reason for the rumors that have Hagsgate full of ghouls and werewolves. Most absurd thing I ever heard of." Drinn smiled. He was a naughty man with a turtle's hard, empty jaws. "It's the same thing," he said. "Listen, the town of Hagsgate is under a curse." The room was suddenly very still, and in the beery light the faces of the townsfolk looked as tight and pale as cheese. Schmendrick laughed again. "A blessing, you mean? In this bony kingdom of old Haggards, you are like another land altogether, a spring, an oasis. I agree with you that there's enchantment here, but I drink to it." Drinn stopped him as he raised his glass. "Not that toast, my friend. Will you drink to a world 50 years old? It is that long since our sorrow fell, when King Haggard built this castle by the sea." "When the witch built it, I think." Schmendrick wagged a finger at him. "Credit where it's due, after all." "Ah, you know that story," Drinn said. "Then you must also know that Haggard refused to pay the witch when her task was completed." The magician nodded. "Aye, and she cursed him for his greed, cursed the castle, rather. But what had that to do with Hagsgate? The town had done the witch no wrong." "No," Drinn replied, "but neither had it done her any good. She could not unmake the castle, or would not, for she fancied herself an artistic sort and boasted that her work was years ahead of its time. Anyway, she came to the elders of Hagsgate and demanded that they force Haggard to pay what was due her. 'Look at me and see yourselves,' she rasped. 'That's the true test of a town, or of a king. A lord who cheats an ugly old witch will cheat his own folk by and by. Stop him while you can, before you grow used to him.'" Drinn sipped his wine and thoughtfully filled Schmendrick's glass once more. "Haggard paid her no money," he went on, "and Hagsgate, alas, paid her no heed. She was treated politely and referred to the proper authorities, whereupon she flew into a fury and screamed that in our eagerness to make no enemies at all, we had now made 2, he paused, covering his eyes with lids so thin that Molly was sure he could see through them, like a bird. With his eyes closed, he said, "It was then that she cursed Haggard's castle, and cursed our town as well." Thus his greed brought ruin upon us all. In the sighing silence, Molly Grue's voice came down like a hammer on a horseshoe, as though she were again berating poor Captain Cuddy. Haggard's less at fault than you yourselves, she mocked the folk of Hagsgate. For he was only one thief, and you were many. You earned your trouble by your own avarice, not your king's. Drinn opened his eyes and gave her an angry look. We earned nothing, he protested. It was our parents and grandparents whom the witch asked for help, and I'll grant you that they were as much to blame as Haggard in their way. We would have handled the matter quite differently. And every middle-aged face in the room scowled at every older face. One of the old men spoke up in a voice that wheezed and meowed. You would have done just as we did. There were crops to harvest and stock to tend, as there still is. There was Haggard to live with, as there still is. We know very well how you would have behaved. You are our children. Drinn glowered him down, and other men began to shout spitefully. But the magician quieted them all by asking, what was the curse? Could it have anything to do with the Red Bull? The name rang coldly, even in the bright room, and Molly felt suddenly lonely. On an impulse, she added her own question, though it had nothing to do with the conversation. Have any of you ever seen a unicorn? It was then that she learned two things, the difference between silence and utter silence, and that she had been quite right to ask that question. The Hagsgate faces tried not to move, but they did move. Drinn said carefully, we never see the bull, and we never speak of him. Nothing that concerns him can be any business of ours. As for unicorns, there are none. There never were. He poured the black wine again. I will tell you the words of the curse, he said. He folded his hands before him and began to chant. You whom Haggard holds in thrall, share his feast and share his fall. You shall see your fortune flower, till the torrent takes the tower. Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swelling down. A few others joined in as he recited the old malediction. Their voices were sad and far, as though they were not in the room at all, but were tumbling in the wind high over the inn's chimney, helpless as dead leaves. What is it about their faces? Molly wondered. I almost know. The magician sat silently by her, rolling his wine-glass in his long hands. When those words were first spoken, Drinn said, Haggard had not been long in the country, and all of it was still soft and blooming, all but the town of Hagsgate. Hagsgate was then as this land has become, a scrabbly, bare place where men put great stones on the roofs of their huts to keep them from blowing away. He grinned bitterly at the older man. Crops to harvest, stock to tend. You grew cabbages and rutabagas and a few pale potatoes, and in all of Hagsgate there was but one weary cow. Strangers thought the town accursed, having offended some vindictive witch or other. Molly felt the unicorn go by in the street, then turn and come back, restless as the torches on the walls, that bowed and wriggled. She wanted to run out to her, but instead she asked quietly, and afterward, when that had come true. Drinn answered, From that moment we have known nothing but bounty. Our grim earth has grown so kind that gardens and orchards spring up by themselves. We need neither to plant nor to tend them. Our flocks multiply. Our craftsmen become more clever in their sleep. The air we breathe and the water we drink keep us from ever knowing illness. All sorrow parts to go around us, and this has come about while the rest of the realm, once so green, has shriveled to cinders under Haggard's hand. For 50 years, none but he and we have prospered. It is as though all others had been cursed. Share his feast and share his fall, Schmendrick murmured. I see. He gulped another glass of the black wine and laughed. But old King Haggard still rules, and will until the sea overflows. You don't know what a real curse is. Let me tell you my troubles. Easy tears suddenly glittered in his eyes. To begin with, my mother never liked me. She pretended, but I knew. Drinn interrupted him, and just then Molly realized what was strange about the folk of Hagsgate. Every one of them was well and warmly dressed, but the faces that peered out of their fine clothes were the faces of poor people, cold as ghosts and too hungry to eat. Drinn said, Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swelling down. How can we delight in our good fortune when we know that it must end, and that one of us will end it? Every day makes us richer, and brings us one day nearer to our doom. Magician, for 50 years we have lived leanly, avoided attachments, untied old habits, readying ourselves for the sea. We have taken not a moment's joy in our wealth, or in anything else, for joy is just one more thing to lose. Pity Hagsgate, strangers, for in all the wretched world there can be no town more unhappy. Lost, 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 the townsfolk whimpered. Misery, misery we. Molly Grue stared wordlessly at them, but Schmendrick said respectfully, That's a good curse. That's a professional job. I always say, whatever you are having done, go to an expert. It pays in the long run. Drinn frowned, and Molly nudged Schmendrick. The magician blinked. Oh, well, what is it you wish of me? I must warn you that I am not a very skillful sorcerer, but I will be glad to lift this curse from you, if I can. I had not taken you for any more than you are, Drinn answered. But, such as you are, you should do as well as any. I think we will leave the curse the way it is. If it were lifted, we might not become poor again, but we would no longer grow steadily richer, and that would be just as bad. No, our real task is to keep Haggard's tower from falling, and since the hero who will destroy it can only come from Hagsgate, this should not be impossible. For one thing, we allow no strangers to settle here. We keep them away, by force if we must, but more often by guile. Those dark tales of Hagsgate that you spoke of, we invented them ourselves, and spread them as widely as we could to make certain that we would have few visitors. He smiled proudly with his hollow jaws. Schmendrick propped his chin on his knuckles and regarded Drinn with a sagging smile. What about your own children? He asked. How can you keep one of them from growing up fulfilling the curse? He looked around the inn, sleepily studying every wrinkled face that looked back at him. Come to think of it, he said slowly, are there no young people in this town? How early do you send children to bed in Hagsgate? No one answered him. Molly could hear blood creaking in ears and eyes, and skin twitching like water plucked by the wind. Then Drinn said, We have no children. We have had none since the day that the curse was laid upon us. He coughed into his fist and added, It seemed the most obvious way of foiling the witch. Schmendrick threw back his head and laughed without making a sound, laughed to make the torches dance. Molly realized that the magician was quite drunk. Drinn's mouth disappeared, and his eyes hardened into cracked porcelain. I see no humor in our plight, he said softly. None at all. None, Schmendrick gurgled, bowing over the table and spilling his wine. None, pardon me, none at all. Under the angry gaze of 200 eyes, he managed to recover himself and reply seriously to Drinn. Then it would seem to me that you have no worries. None that would worry you, anyway. A small wee of laughter sneaked out between his lips, like steam from a tea kettle. So it would seem. Drinn leaned forward and touched Schmendrick's wrist with 2 fingers. But I have not told you all the truth. 21 years ago, a child was born in Hagsgate. Whose child it was, we never knew. I found it myself as I was crossing the marketplace one winter's night. It was lying on a butcher's block, not crying, although there was snow, but warm and chuckling under a comforter of stray cats. They were all purring together, and the sound was heavy with knowledge. I stood by the strange cradle for a long time, pondering while the snow fell and the cats purred prophecy. He stopped, and Molly Grue said eagerly, You took the child home with you, of course, and raised it as your own. Drinn laid his hands palm up on the table. I chased the cats away, he said, and went home alone. Molly's face turned the color of mist. Drinn shrugged slightly. I know the birth of a hero when I see it, he said. Omens and portents, snakes in the nursery. Had it not been for the cats, I might have chanced the child, but they made it so obvious, so mythological. What was I to do? Knowingly harbor Hagsgate's doom? His lip twitched, as though a hook had sat in it. As it happens, I erred, but it was on the side of tenderness. When I returned at sunrise, the baby had vanished. Schmendrick was drawing pictures with his finger in a puddle of wine, and might have heard nothing at all. Drinn went on. Naturally, no one ever admitted to leaving the child in the marketplace, and though we searched every house from cellar to dovecot, we never found it again. I might have concluded that wolves had taken the brat, or even that I had dreamed the whole encounter, cats and all, but for the fact that on the very next day a herald of King Haggard's came riding into town ordering us to rejoice. After 30 years of waiting, the king had a son at last. He looked away from the look on Molly's face. Our foundling, incidentally, was a boy. Schmendrick licked the tip of his finger and looked up. Lír, he said thoughtfully. Prince Lír. But was there no other way to account for his appearance? Not likely, Drinn snorted. Any woman that would marry Haggard, even Haggard would refuse. He gave out the tale that the boy was a nephew, whom he graciously adopted on the death of his parents. But Haggard has no relatives, no family. There are those who say that he was born of an overcast, as Venus was born out of the sea. No one would give King Haggard a child to raise. The magician calmly held out his glass, and filled it himself when Drinn refused. Well, he got one somewhere, and good for him. But how could he have come by your little cat baby? Drinn said, he walks in Hagsgate at night, not often, but now and then. Many of us have seen him, tall, haggard, grey as driftwood, prowling alone under an iron moon, picking up dropped coins, broken dishes, spoons, stones, handkerchiefs, rings, stepped-on apples, anything, everything. No reason to it. It was Haggard who took the child. I am as certain of it as I am certain that Prince Lír is the one who will topple the tower and sink Haggard and Hagsgate together. I hope he is, Molly broke in. I hope Prince Lír is that baby you left to die, and I hope he drowns your town, and I hope the fish nibble you bare as corncobs. Schmendrick kicked her ankle as hard as he could, for the listeners were beginning to hiss like embers, and a few were rising to their feet. He asked again, What is it you wish of me? You are on your way to Haggard's castle, I believe. Schmendrick nodded. Ah, Drinn said. Now, a clever magician would find it simple to become friendly with Prince Lír, who is reputed to be a young man of eagerness and curiosity. A clever magician might be acquainted with all manner of odd potions and powders, puppets and philters, herbs and banes and unguents. A clever magician, mind you, I said clever, no more. A clever magician might be able, under the proper circumstances. He let the rest drift away unspoken, but no less said. For a meal, Schmendrick stood up, knocking his chair over. He leaned on the table with both hands, breathing harshly. Is that the going rate these days? Dinner and wine the price of a poisoned prince? You have to do better than that, friend Drinn. I wouldn't do in a chimney sweep for such a fee. Molly Grue gripped his arm, crying. What are you saying? The magician shook her hand away, but at the same time he lowered one eyelid in a slow wink. Drinn leaned back in his chair, smiling. I never haggle with a professional, he said. 25 pieces of gold. They haggled for half an hour, Schmendrick demanding 100 gold pieces, and Drinn refusing to offer more than 40. At last they settled at 70, half to be paid then, and half upon Schmendrick's successful return. Drinn counted out the money on the spot from a leather pouch at his belt. You'll spend a night in Hagsgate, of course, he said. I would be pleased to put you up myself. But the magician shook his head. I think not. We will go on to the castle, since we're so near it now. The sooner there, the sooner back, eh? And he grinned a crafty and conspiratorial grin. Haggard's castle is always dangerous, Drinn warned, but it is never more dangerous than at night. They say that about Hagsgate too, Schmendrick replied. You mustn't believe everything you hear, Drinn. He walked to the door of the inn, and Molly followed him. There he turned and beamed at the folk of Hagsgate, hunched in their finery. I would like to leave you with this last thought, he told them. The most professional curse ever snarled or crooked or thundered can have no effect on a pure heart. Good night. Outside, the night lay coiled in the street, cobra cold and scaled with stars. There was no moon. Schmendrick stepped out boldly, chuckling to himself and jingling his gold coins. Without looking at Molly, he said, Suckers! To assume so lightly that all magicians dabble in death. Now, if they had wanted me to live the curse, I might have done that for no more than a meal. I might have done it for a single glass of wine. I'm glad you didn't, Molly said savagely. They deserved their fate. They deserved worse, to leave the child out in the snow. Well, if they hadn't, he couldn't have grown up to be a prince. Haven't you ever been in a fairy tale before? The magician's voice was kind and drunken, and his eyes were as bright as his new money. The hero has to make a prophecy come true, and the villain is the one who has to stop him, though in another kind of story, it's more often the other way around. and a hero has to be in trouble from the moment of his birth, or he's not a real hero. It's a great relief to find out about Prince Lír. I have been waiting for this tale to turn up a leading man." The unicorn was there as a star is suddenly there, moving a little way ahead of them, a sail in the dark. Molly said, "If Lír is the hero, what is she?" "That's different. Haggard and Lír and Drinn and you and I, we are in a fairy tale, and must go where it goes. But she is real. She's real." Schmendrick yawned and hiccuped and shivered all at once. "We'd better hurry," he said. "Perhaps we should have stayed the night, but old Drinn makes me nervous. I'm sure I deceived him completely, but all the same." It seemed to Molly, dreaming and waking as she walked, that Hagsgate was stretching itself like a paw to hold the three of them back, curling around them and batting them gently back and forth, so that they trod in their own tracks over and over. In 100 years they reached the last house at the end of the town. In another 50 years they had blundered through the damp fields, the vineyards, and the crouching orchards. Molly dreamed that sheep leered at them from treetops, and that old cows stepped on their feet and shoved them off the withering path. But the light of the unicorn sailed on ahead, and Molly followed it, awake or asleep. King Haggard's castle was stalking in the sky, a blind blackbird that fished the valley by night. Molly could hear the breathing of his wings. Then the unicorn's breath stirred in her hair, and she heard Schmendrick asking, "How many men?" "3 men, the unicorn said. "They have been behind us since we left Hagsgate, but now they are coming swiftly. Listen." Staff too soft for their quickness, voices too muffled to mean any good. The magician rubbed his eyes. "Perhaps Drinn has started to feel guilty about underpaying his poisoner," he murmured. "Perhaps his conscience is keeping him awake. Anything is possible. Perhaps I have feathers." He took Molly by the arm and pulled her down into a hard hollow by the side of the road. The unicorn lay nearby, still as moonlight. Daggers gleaming like fish trails on a dark sea. A voice, suddenly loud and angry. "I tell you, we've lost him. We passed him a mile back, where I heard that rustling. I'm damned if I'll run any farther." "Be still," a second voice whispered fiercely. "Do you want them to escape and betray us? You're afraid of the magician, but you do better to be afraid of the Red Bull. If Haggard finds out about our half of the curse, he'll send the bull to trample us all into crumbs." The first man answered in a softer tone. "It isn't that I'm afraid. A magician without a beard is no magician at all, but we're wasting our time." They left the road and cut across country as soon as they knew we were following. "We could chase along here all night and never come up with them." Another voice, wearier than the first two. "We have chased them all night. Look over there. Dawn is coming." Molly found that she had wriggled halfway under Schmendrick's black cloak and buried her face in a clump of spiny dead grass. She dared not raise her head, but she opened her eyes and saw that the air was growing strangely light. The second man said, "You're a fool. It's a good 2 hours to morning, and besides, we're heading west." "In that case," the third voice replied, "I'm going home." Footsteps started briskly back up the road. The first man called, "Wait, don't go. Wait, I'll go with you." To the second man, he muttered hastily, "I'm not going home. I just want to retrace our trail a little way. I still think I heard them, and I've dropped my tinderbox somewhere." Molly could hear him edging off as he spoke. "Damn you for cowards," the second man swore. "Wait a moment then. Will you wait till I try what Drinn told me?" The retreating footsteps hesitated, and he chanted loudly, "Warmer than summer, more filling than food, sweeter than woman, and dearer than blood." "Hurry," the third voice said. "Hurry, look at the sky. What is this nonsense?" Even the second man's voice was growing nervous. "It isn't nonsense. Drinn treats his money so well that it cannot bear to be parted from him. Most touching relationship you ever saw. This is the way he calls to it," he went on rapidly, quavering a little. "Stronger than water and kinder than dove, say the name of the one you love." "Drinn," rang the gold coins in Schmendrick's purse. "Drinn, Drinn, Drinn, Drinn." Then everything happened. The ragged black cloak whipped against Molly's cheek as Schmendrick rolled to his knees, groping desperately for the purse. It buzzed like a rattlesnake in his hand. He hurled it far into the brush, but the 3 men were running at them together, daggers as red as though they had already struck. Beyond King Haggard's castle, a burning brightness was rising, breaking into the night like a great shoulder. The magician stood erect, menacing the attackers with demons, metamorphoses, paralyzing ailments, and secret judo holds. Molly picked up a rock. With an old, gay, terrible cry of ruin, the unicorn reared out of her hiding place. Her hoofs came slashing down like a rain of razors, her mane raged, and on her forehead she wore a plume of lightning. The three assassins dropped their daggers and hid their faces, and even Molly Grue and Schmendrick cowered before her. But the unicorn saw none of them. Mad, dancing, sea-white, she bellowed her challenge again. And the brightness answered her with a bellow like the sound of ice breaking up in the spring. Drinn's men fled, stumbling and shrieking. Haggard's castle was on fire, tossing wildly in a sudden cold wind. Molly said aloud, "But it has to be the sea. It's supposed to be." She thought that she could see a window, as far away as it was, and a grey face. Then the Red Bull came.